Intro. You know what's strange? Most people today wake up tired. Not physically. Something deeper. They sleep 8 hours. Drink coffee. Watch productivity videos. Make to-do lists. And yet somehow, they still feel exhausted. Not the kind of exhaustion that disappears after a good night's sleep. The kind that follows you everywhere. The kind that sits on your chest when you wake up. The kind that makes simple things feel heavy. Answering a text. Making a phone call. Starting that project you've been thinking about for months. Even doing the things you once loved. And eventually, because nobody can see this exhaustion, people start giving it a name. They call it laziness. Maybe you've called yourself lazy too. Maybe you've looked at other people and wondered, how are they doing all of this? Why can't I seem to move forward? What's wrong with me? But what if the real problem isn't laziness? What if you've simply been carrying too much for too long? And what if nobody ever taught you how to put it down? Because the truth is, modern society has become incredibly good at measuring productivity, but terrible at understanding the human soul. Today we're going to talk about a form of exhaustion that most people feel but very few people understand. And if you've made it this far already, there's a good chance this video isn't finding you by accident. Because deep down, you know something inside of you is tired. And not in the way everyone thinks. The invisible weight. Imagine carrying a backpack. At first, it's light. Barely noticeable. But every disappointment adds another stone. Every betrayal. Every heartbreak. Every failure. Every expectation. Every moment you had to pretend you were okay when you weren't. Another stone. And another. And another. Eventually, you've been carrying this weight for so long that you stop noticing it's there. It becomes normal. You tell yourself, this is just life. But here's the problem. Your mind never stopped carrying it. And your nervous system never forgot. The human brain is remarkable. It remembers experiences long after the event is gone. Especially painful ones. A harsh rejection. A humiliating moment. A period of loneliness. A relationship that broke something inside you. You move on. But part of your mind remains standing in that moment. Waiting. Protecting. Preparing. And this is where many people become trapped. Because eventually they're no longer living life. They're managing emotional debt. Debt accumulated over years of surviving. Not living. Surviving. There's a difference. And if you're constantly surviving, of course you're tired. Why modern life makes it worse? Now here's where things become dangerous. Because the world you're living in today was never designed to give you peace. Think about it. The moment you wake up. Notifications. Messages. News. Videos. Emails. Algorithms competing for your attention. Everyone wants something from you. Your focus. Your money. Your energy. Your time. But very few things are giving anything back. And the result? You consume more information in a single day than many people consumed in months throughout history. Your brain never gets silence. Your mind never gets space. Your soul never gets a chance to breathe. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once observed something fascinating. He believed human beings spend their lives swinging between desire and boredom. Always chasing. Always wanting. Always reaching for the next thing. And modern technology has turned that cycle into a machine. One more video. One more scroll. One more notification. One more achievement. One more purchase. One more distraction. But here's the uncomfortable question. When was the last time you sat alone with your thoughts? No phone. No music. No distractions. Just you. For many people, that sounds terrifying. Not because silence is scary, but because silence reveals what distraction has been hiding. And that's exactly why so many people never stop moving. Not because they're energized, because they're running. Carl Jung's warning. Carl Jung believed something most people never realize. He believed that what we refuse to face within ourselves doesn't disappear. It waits. It hides in the shadows. And eventually it begins controlling our lives from the background. He called this the shadow. The parts of ourselves we avoid. The pain we never processed. The grief we never felt. The anger we never expressed. The fears we never admitted. And here's what happens. The longer we avoid those parts of ourselves, the more energy it takes to keep them buried. Think about that. Imagine trying to hold a beach ball underwater. For a few seconds it's easy. But eventually your arms begin shaking. Because suppression requires energy. Constantly. Every day. Many people aren't tired because they're doing too much. They're tired because they're carrying emotions they've never allowed themselves to feel. And that exhaustion cannot be solved with productivity hacks. It cannot be solved with another motivational speech. It cannot be solved with another morning routine. Because the problem isn't your schedule. The problem is the war happening inside you. The difference between rest and escape. Here's something most people never realize. Rest and escape are not the same thing. And confusing the two may be one of the biggest reasons people remain exhausted. Think about your average evening. You finish work. You're tired. So you scroll. Watch videos. Open social media. Maybe binge a show. Hours pass. You were supposedly resting. Yet somehow, when it's time to sleep, you still feel drained. Why? Because your mind wasn't resting. It was escaping. Real rest restores energy. Escape merely distracts you from noticing its absence. The philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote something remarkable nearly 400 years ago. He observed that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Think about how profound that is. For centuries before smartphones, before social media, before endless entertainment, Pascal recognized something fundamental about human nature. People fear stillness. Because stillness forces us to encounter ourselves. And most people would rather consume another hour of content than spend 10 minutes confronting what's actually hurting them. The tragedy is that every form of escape offers temporary relief. But eventually the bill arrives. And when it does, the exhaustion remains. In many ways, modern society has become one giant escape machine. A civilization designed to keep people distracted from themselves. Not because distraction is evil, but because distraction is profitable. The more disconnected you become from your inner world, the easier it becomes to sell you solutions for problems you don't fully understand. And so people spend years searching for energy without realizing they've been leaking it through constant avoidance. The exhaustion of wearing a mask. Now let's go deeper. Because there is another form of exhaustion that rarely gets discussed. The exhaustion of pretending. Carl Jung called it the persona. The social mask we wear to function in society. The version of ourselves that earns approval. The version that fits in. The version that people expect. And don't misunderstand. The persona isn't inherently bad. Everyone wears one. You act differently with your parents than your friends. Differently at work than at home. That's normal. The problem begins when the mask becomes your entire identity. When the role becomes more real than the person beneath it. How many people spend years pretending they're strong? Pretending they're happy? Pretending they're confident? Pretending they don't care? Pretending they're okay? Every act of performance consumes energy. Every day spent hiding your true feelings creates friction between who you are and who you're pretending to be. And friction creates exhaustion. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard believed that one of the greatest forms of despair is losing yourself while appearing successful to everyone else. Read that again. Losing yourself while appearing successful. Many people today are admired by others but disconnected from themselves. Surrounded by people but lonely. Accomplished but empty. Busy but unfulfilled. Because deep down they know something. The life they're living isn't entirely theirs. It's a performance built from expectations. And maintaining that performance becomes exhausting. Not because you're weak. Because no human being was designed to wear a mask 24 hours a day. Why your mind feels heavy. Have you ever noticed how difficult simple tasks become when you're emotionally overwhelmed? Replying to a message feels impossible. Making a decision feels exhausting. Starting something new feels overwhelming. Many people assume this means they're lazy. But psychology tells a different story. The human brain consumes a tremendous amount of energy. And emotional conflict dramatically increases that demand. Imagine having 50 browser tabs open on a computer. Even if you're only using one tab, the others are still consuming resources. The same thing happens psychologically. Unresolved emotions operate in the background. Unfinished grief. Unspoken anger. Lingering shame. Chronic anxiety. The brain never fully stops processing them. And over time this creates what psychologists sometimes call cognitive load. An invisible burden on mental resources. This is why a person can spend an entire day doing almost nothing and still feel exhausted. The exhaustion isn't coming from activity. It's coming from internal conflict. The battle nobody else can see. And perhaps the cruelest part is that society often punishes people for symptoms without understanding their causes. People see the lack of motivation, but not the burden beneath it. They see the hesitation, but not the fear behind it. They see the withdrawal, but not the pain creating it. And eventually many people begin believing the same story. I must be broken. I must be lazy. I must be weak. When in reality they're simply carrying more psychological weight than they realize. Nietzsche and the loss of meaning. Now we arrive at something even deeper. Something many psychologists and philosophers have identified as the true crisis of modern life. Meaning. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this problem long before most people. He warned that as traditional structures of meaning weakened, people would face a terrifying question. Why am I doing any of this? Notice something. Human beings can endure incredible suffering when that suffering has meaning. Parents sacrifice for their children. Athletes endure years of hardship. Entrepreneurs survive repeated failure. Soldiers withstand unimaginable conditions. Not because suffering disappears. Because meaning makes suffering bearable. But what happens when meaning disappears? Suddenly even small challenges become overwhelming. The Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl experienced this firsthand. While imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps, he observed something extraordinary. Those who maintained a sense of purpose often endured hardships that seemed impossible. Later, he wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Think about that. Perhaps your exhaustion isn't merely physical. Perhaps it's existential. Maybe part of you isn't asking for more productivity. Maybe it's asking for purpose. And purpose cannot be downloaded, purchased, or consumed. It must be discovered. Which is why so many people feel empty despite having access to everything previous generations dreamed of. More convenience. More entertainment. More comfort. More technology. Yet somehow less fulfillment. Because comfort and meaning are not the same thing. And a comfortable life without meaning eventually becomes unbearable. The hidden cost of hyper-awareness. There is another group of people I want to speak to directly. The overthinkers. The deep thinkers. The highly self-aware individuals. The people who notice everything. The ones who replay conversations. Analyze situations. Question motives. Reflect constantly. At first glance, self-awareness seems like a gift. And often it is. But there is a hidden cost. Carl Jung understood this well. The more conscious you become, the more complexity you perceive. You begin seeing contradictions, patterns, nuances, human weaknesses, your own flaws, the world's imperfections. And this awareness can become heavy. Because ignorance often provides comfort. Awareness removes illusions. Fyodor Dostoevsky explored this idea repeatedly in his writings. Many of his characters suffered not because they knew too little, but because they knew too much. They saw beneath appearances. And once you see beneath appearances, you cannot unsee it. This is why some of the most thoughtful people often struggle with exhaustion. They're carrying layers of reality that others may never notice. If that's you, understand something. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. Your awareness is not a defect. But awareness without balance becomes a burden. You were never meant to carry the entire weight of existence on your shoulders. You were only meant to carry your part. And learning the difference is wisdom. The path back to yourself. If you've made it this far, I want you to know something. This part of the video is for you. Not for the person casually scrolling. Not for someone looking for a quick productivity hack. For you. The person who recognized themselves in these words. The person who is tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Because after everything we've discussed, one question remains. How do you heal? How do you recover from spiritual exhaustion? The answer may disappoint the part of you that wants a quick fix. Because healing is rarely dramatic. It's usually quiet. Slow. Almost invisible at first. And it begins with something most people avoid. Honesty. Not honesty with the world. Honesty with yourself. Carl Jung once wrote, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think about that. How much of your exhaustion comes from battles you've never fully acknowledged? What grief are you still carrying? What disappointment have you never accepted? What anger have you buried? What dream did you quietly abandon? What pain have you convinced yourself you're over? Healing begins the moment you stop running from these questions. Not because the answers are easy, but because avoidance is exhausting. And truth, while painful, is surprisingly freeing. For years, many people exhaust themselves trying to outrun wounds that only wanted to be acknowledged. Stop trying to fix everything. One of the greatest misconceptions about personal growth is the belief that every flaw must be eliminated, every weakness corrected, every insecurity conquered, every wound healed. But life doesn't work that way. The ancient Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius spent years reminding himself of a simple truth. You do not control everything. You control your response. That's it. Yet so much exhaustion comes from fighting reality. Fighting the past. Fighting other people. Fighting circumstances. Fighting ourselves. Imagine swimming against a powerful current. The harder you fight, the more exhausted you become. Eventually wisdom emerges. Not as surrender, but as acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean liking reality. It means seeing it clearly. And clear vision saves energy. Because resistance is expensive. The philosopher Epictetus taught that suffering often comes not from events themselves, but from our judgments about them. A delayed success. A failed relationship. A difficult chapter. These experiences hurt. But often what truly destroys us is the story we attach to them. I'm behind. I'm a failure. I'll never recover. I'm not enough. These stories become prisons. And prisons require enormous energy to maintain. Sometimes healing begins not by changing your life, but by changing the story you're telling yourself about your life. Rebuilding energy through meaning. Now let's return to Viktor Frankl. Because I believe he discovered something profound. People don't become strong because life becomes easier. They become strong because life becomes meaningful. And meaning isn't found by asking, what do I want from life? It's found by asking, what is life asking of me? Notice the difference. One question makes you a consumer. The other makes you a participant. Maybe life is asking you to become more patient, more courageous, more authentic. Maybe it's asking you to forgive, to create, to learn, to serve, to love, to begin again. The strange thing about meaning is that it often appears when we stop obsessing over happiness. Modern culture tells us to pursue happiness. But happiness is fleeting. Meaning endures. A meaningful life will still contain pain, loss, failure, uncertainty. But those experiences become part of a larger story. And stories give suffering context. Without context, pain feels pointless. With context, pain becomes growth. A message for you. And now, before this video ends, I want to speak directly to the person still listening. Maybe you've felt lost lately. Maybe you've been questioning yourself. Maybe you've been calling yourself lazy, weak, undisciplined, unmotivated. Maybe you've spent months wondering why everything feels heavier than it used to. If that's you, I hope you leave this video with a different perspective. Maybe you were never lazy. Maybe you were carrying invisible burdens. Maybe you were surviving experiences nobody else could see. Maybe you were fighting battles that never appeared on the outside. Maybe you've simply been tired for too long. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop treating yourself like a machine. Machines are optimized. Humans are understood. Machines are repaired. Humans are healed. You don't need to earn your worth through endless productivity. You don't need to prove your value through constant achievement. You don't need to run forever. The world will always demand more. More attention. More effort. More output. But your soul has different needs. Silence. Meaning. Connection. Truth. Rest. And perhaps the most courageous thing you can do in a world obsessed with speed is to slow down long enough to hear yourself again. Conclusion. So if you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. Your exhaustion is not evidence that you've failed. It may be evidence that you've ignored yourself for too long. And healing doesn't begin when you become a different person. It begins when you return to the person you've been abandoning. Little by little. Day by day. Moment by moment. Not through perfection. Not through hustle. Not through endless self-improvement. But through awareness. Honesty. Meaning. And compassion. Because the truth is, you were never meant to carry the entire world. You were only meant to carry yourself. And if you've made it this far, thank you. Not for watching this video, but for staying. For continuing. For surviving every chapter that tried to convince you to give up. The fact that you're here means something. The fact that you're still trying means something. And the fact that you're listening to these words right now means that somewhere inside you, hope is still alive. Protect it. Nurture it. Follow it.